Zach from Gravel by California, here in Yorba Linda, where I'm ready to head into the Chino Hills with Thank Gravel It's Friday. Now, I cannot tell a lie. I've been meaning to do a video of this area for a real long time, but sometimes it's difficult in spring when you've got this May haze, June gloom, or July I don't know why. Still, this should be a great time of the year with the hills still blooming, and there's a lot of trails out there to explore, so we've got to chop to it. Let's roll.
With its saturated springtime hues, Chino Hills has been highly sought after at GBC, but our attempts have been thwarted by rain closures. But we hoped we could catch on to one of our friends' rides, as joining Thank Gravel It's Friday wouldn't be such a stretch. Well, there are a number of places you can start. We began in Yorba Linda. That's home to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library, containing his birth home that is not a coincidence, featuring this famous chopper that served from Kennedy to Ford, and maybe we should check if this part of the White House is missing. Our Chino Hills route had 4 major components, first starting with the steady 6-mile climb up Telegraph Canyon, continuing with this 4.5-mile loop punctuated by single track down Bane Ridge, then getting deeper into the state park with an out and back up Bobcat Ridge, and ending on the most extreme portion of the day, going up and down South Ridge. Altogether, we totaled 34 miles, where I felt more than the listed 4,000 feet of gain. This 180-degree view didn't show the extent, beginning our journey on the El Cajon Trail, not realizing when shooting B-roll earlier that this route would also pass by the Nixon Library, and that the helicopter blades would stick out over these watered gates.
Get a haircut here.
The El Cajon Trail is a nice piece of infrastructure, weaving in and out of the residential in a suburban fashion. That was a nice warm-up to get this ride going, and of course choosing the dirt option when presented. We did have to hit a little more road going up Prospect Avenue, but this surface timed out after a mile. That early, I'm not sure if this was for future homes or just an easement used as a connection, but I did know we were higher than I thought, making our way into Carbon Canyon Regional Park, holding a unique treasure in the vertical direction in the largest Redwood Grove in Southern California that was planted in 1975 and are about a quarter the size of normal redwoods. That definitely contrasted with the rest of the environs. At this point, the ride felt like a prelude, weaving our way around directionally, not really aware of which direction we were headed, just following around in this maze, with the railings sending us along like cattle, though efficiently doing its job, getting us into the west entrance of Chino Hills State Park, where the fun was just starting. We didn't have to pay the $10 entrance fee, not needing to park a car, although there seemed like there would be plenty of space for them to proceed, but entering Telegraph Canyon at a very comfortable pace, where the climbing is mostly low stress for the 6 miles. Intrigued by the spring colors, although some knew this was just the start, but for those of us who didn't know, just try taking it all in, as we got into it really thickly, as this was a lot to absorb.
While I've never ridden here before, I have been on this canyon before as a trail runner and did not get to experience this wonderful bloom. One thing at the time I was wishing was, wish there was a way I could experience this even faster. If there's only a way.
Even with my sparse memory of me running through, I had some idea what would be coming up, because I'm always curious to see if geology wins out. So whenever I hear the word canyon used in my route, the bottom tends to be flatter and smoother, thanks to water spreading sediment over time, but getting near the halfway point, passing Little Canyon Trail, the consistency of the grade began to fluctuate, crossing the upper veins of the creek, mixed in with a lot of gear shifting, even harder to anticipate what's ahead thanks to the height of the bloom, and the top of Telegraph Canyon has less access to water carving it out, meaning reaching the peak would become more windy and punctuating your effort getting there. On the flip side, it was time to let gravity take its course, giving back all the elevation we gained in about a third of the distance, meaning these 2 miles were going to be fast ones. But even if I knew the section well, I'd be pumping my brakes regardless, as there were a lot of people around, with visibility around these plants playing an even larger factor here, not to mention the distraction with the hills opening up, seeing the density of the yellows shift on every turn. Exiting out, you have to trust your perspective skills with a bit of a momentum stopper on Bane Canyon Road that at least paid off with panoramas at the top and our first major regroup of the day, as Jace was right to be happy so far, getting a timely education on the habitat during our pause on how these black mustard plants are an invasive species on the Pacific coast, whose proliferation is owed back to the Catholic missionaries. Very hard to do much against its spread. With Anton rolling in, it was time to start phase 2, beginning this 4.5 mile loop in a counterclockwise direction, and with a little bit of traffic on the road, veering off to take the parallel Bane Canyon trail that got us off the street, but had less space to work with at the start, as the rules of that C word still applied, as this 1.5 mile stretch averaged 3% and was pretty tame for the first half, with some minimal redirects as we continue to proceed, with some pitchiness coming in on cue. But the climbing wasn't done merging onto the pavement, and was about to get worse getting off-road, though only for 1/4 mile, setting up the main attraction of this loop, where I could go more in depth of the word ridge, but they tend to vary more based on amplitude, as Bane Ridge went up and down like a highly compressed sideways coil. There was a little bit of overshoot on our part, as the road might have been the more expedited way, but gravel. Thankful I saw people ahead that knew where we were going, with me assuming that we had a climb coming up, but not knowing we had a slight downhill for the next half mile, and a lot of manpower put into these crossings, as this section was pretty intriguing to me. Not that I forgot to do my own research that this was just an out and back, but after our break at Telegraph Canyon, I wanted to see where this canyon led, with the geography not being as extreme as Bane Ridge, leaving an endless amount of rolling hills. Though still, there was a lot of work getting up, as this climb felt longer than its stated 2 miles, thanks to the 7% average and the illusion of this wide fire road. But odds are, if you're watching this video now, the hills are not this yellow, meaning these plants have dried up and now feel whip-like. So yeah, glad to have a little bit of width not to run into them. So like others, I can't rationalize why this beauty is here, and maybe it'll be even more temporary than we think, meaning just enjoy it while we still can. Now while there were options to continue on, this was our turnaround point. And if people wanted to point fingers who to thank, it was Jace for playing this route, helping us save our legs for the next part, as Anton was on the other end, making sure the group was together. The great part about out and backs is that you know what's coming up, although you always have to make the adjustment of doing it at speed. But the nice part about having this wide a road is you can choose what you think is the best option, which we'll see how successful I was while trying to capture it cleanly. Our backtracking would continue on Bane Canyon Road, cresting our way back to our first recollect, though not stopping there on this go around, making our way back onto Telegraph Canyon, a bit trickier this time with my helmet cam on, and definitely not as easy in this direction with the slope flirting near 10% for the first mile, with the consistency messing with my mind, and some of these grades doing me worse.
We've got 3 kilometers left. Hope that's not a lot.
This little reprieve gave a break from the continuous climbing until our turnoff onto South Ridge, unfortunately leveling up where the grade averaged a little over 10% to the peak, with a good portion of it finding the teens. And even though it's just under a mile from the intersection, South Ridge definitely punches above its weight, barely making more progress than the hikers, and that uncomfortable feeling that the moisture was only getting heavier. And while going to San Juan Hill on the left was an option, everyone was glad we stuck to the easier choice, because we all wanted to give into gravity at this point, with 3 miles of dirt left. And even though it wasn't all downhill, it was enough that you can get by without really pedaling, using some of these portions for some self-care. It was time for a final regroup and the last chance for the gram, with this spring flare saying adios to Chino Hill State Park with 4.5 miles to get back, using a mostly expedited route, except for a little excuse of an offshoot, once again finding some back channels in Yorba Linda that threw out a multi-purpose vibe, giving the choice of avoiding the sandbags or going over them, with a short bit of maneuvering if you're riding full speed, and the end of off-roading fun, funneling out onto pavement for the duration, adding this clip so I can attempt pronouncing Baston Churi Road as the wiggling picked up the closer to our return, once again connecting to the El Cajon Trail. And to paraphrase this president, a ride is over when you quit, ready to close the rolling chapter of our ride, and heading up to Lone Wolf Brewing that was accommodating the bikes, and thumbs up to TGIF for properly showcasing Chino Hills.
You know, it's great to have a feast for the eyes because it definitely takes your mind off your legs. Definitely, if you subtract all the views, the riding is pretty fun. A little bit hard, surfaces dried out here in spring, but still smooth enough. Get those wider tires out there and just enjoy. Definitely seems like a lot of trails to explore and views from all different types of valleys, so I can see why people fall in love with this area, and looks like I am too. And if you want to support us, hit the subscribe button, go to our shop, like our video so we can bring you more. From the Stay Dirt.